Hello everybody, I'm Bill Dance and you're watching Outdoors in the Bluegrass.
Outdoors in the Bluegrass is made possible by Academy Sports and Outdoors, for all for less. Lose, feel the difference. Strike King Lures, tie one on.
How's it going, everybody? It's Tyler Feaster with Outdoors in the Bluegrass. Hey, here in Kentucky, the white bass spawn is roughly about 4 weeks out. So we wanted to come to you and give you a little bit of how-to on how to fish the white bass. Now we're going to break this down into a couple segments for you, actually quite a few. The first thing we want to talk about today is location. That's right. We want to talk about where you're going to fish and find the white bass during the spawn. The next thing we're going to talk about is the timing of the white bass spawning, what you got to look for, when to be prepared, and how to hold your patience just a little bit. The next thing we're going to talk about is the gear that you need to bring. That's right. We want to talk about the gear that you need to have a successful white bass spawn fishing experience. The next item on the list is your tackle. That's right. We want to talk about your tackle. What have we found that's absolutely the best tackle that produces the most enthusiastic white bass spawning frenzy fishing that there is? We also want to talk about conditions of the weather, conditions of the water, and everything far and few between, and conditions of your mindset that get you ready to have an awesome white bass spawning experience. So you can see I'm down here. We're actually going to be talking today specifically about our region of white bass spawning. Like I said, late March, early April is about when we hit. We do Salt River. Now, we fish the Salt River on public WMA land right off the bank. And we do that off of River Road and Palmer Road off of US 44. Now, Salt River feeds into the Taylorsville Reservoir and then discharges out of the tailwaters, which then goes into the river up towards Louisville and everything, which is why we had the crappy conditions of last year when it flooded so badly we had a hard time. As you can see this year, as of right now in January, pardon the wind, we got a front moving in. It's not so bad. It actually looks pretty good. So let's get into this and see what we can do to help you catch the white bass this year. All right, so let's talk about location real fast. What happens is when the temperatures start getting in the right conditions and the timing of year is absolutely perfect, white bass will come out of the lake into the river systems to spawn. Now, your males generally come up first and then your females follow. So you want to make sure you're positioning yourself. We like, depending on, they may make a few like false runs, I guess you could say, as the temperature starts going up and down, but you really want to find a good spot that positions yourself in an area where when they come up in the stream out of the lake, there's some little pocket areas that are a little bit deeper and some rapid shallows in the rocks, because the rocks is where the spawning happens. So you need to look for that. You need to look for some running water that meets some shallow spots and meets some actual ponded areas where it gets a little bit deeper, where you've got some ripples and rocks for them to be attracted to feed off of and spawn. Now let's talk about timing. Timing's a little bit of a fickle one. For here in Kentucky, you're looking, need to start looking about the third week of March to the second week of April, and it all depends on the weather conditions. Really, what makes it absolutely perfect, and this is based upon our experience, when those water temperatures get up to about 55 degrees, when you've got those warmer, consistent nights in the 50 nights, not just days, but nights, to bring those water temperatures up, it's when you really start seeing them move in and getting ready to spawn. Like I said, the males move first and then the females come in after them. But what you really also have to pay attention to is your water levels. Sometimes it's too low, sometimes it's too high, and then you're in trouble. So you've got to really coordinate between your weather, whether it be precipitation and temperature, because if there's not enough water, they're not going to move up far enough, and if there's too much water, you're going to play heck getting to your fishing spot. But that warmer water, that 55 degree mark, now we're talking warmer water coming into the spring spawn, that's what you're looking for. You want to start seeing some sunshine and some warmer nights to bring up that temperature to get them to spawn. There's a little bit of patience involved in it, and you really got to work at it to get down here and put in the time. But thanks to Outdoors in the Bluegrass, we provide you as many updates as we possibly can, so you don't have to have as many wasted trips. But what's a wasted trip to the outdoors, baby? All right, so let's talk gear. We bank fish, and that's really the best scenario here. You can do some kayak fishing, you can do some wading, but what we found is when you do the wading, you really upset the fishing situation in Salt River, where we fish off of this public WMA land. The water moves too much for kayaks, and I'm going to explain a little bit more into that, why you want to have the ability to move up and down the bank during the spawning. Now, so because we're going to be fishing off the bank, the gear you want some muck boots, because you're leading either during the second spawn or the first spawn in spring, the second spawn during the autumn. It's going to be wet and muddy, guys. That's all there is to it. You want to have your muck boots on. You want to be prepared to get muddy. You want to make sure that you got enough clothing on to be warm, but not cold. You got to find that balance where you're comfortable. You don't want to be outdoors sweating, all bundled up sweating, and then when you get relaxed out here and start fishing, you get cold, that sweat freezes, you can start getting a little bit of hypothermia, so there's a little bit of safety for you. Obviously, you want to bring some fishing gear. You want to bring your tackle box that's got every necessity in it that you can possibly think about, whether it be some additional line. You definitely want some additional line when you're fishing off the bank, because you're going to bird nest a rod one way or another or get snagged. Obviously, you want to bring your rods and reels. We use the Lew's Speed Series, Mach 1 spinnings, and the Laser MG bait casting reels, and we use them on 7-foot rods. Now, most people won't use 7-foot rods out here because of the low-lying branches and everything else, but I'm a 7-foot rod guy. I'm going to use them. We adapt. Bring more than one rod and reel, especially if you're not going to bring some additional line. You will get snagged at some point in time, and you don't want that ruining your experience. Bring additional gear. Make sure you got your fishing pliers. Make sure you got some toilet paper. And most importantly, you want to make sure that you've got some additional protection. You're out in the wild, guys. You are out in the wild, and you will never know what you run into, especially types of coyotes and stuff out here. So make sure you bring some protection. That is my suggestion. Now, I open carry. I don't care if people see what I'm doing. A machete is highly suggested, especially if you're coming out in the fall. If you're doing the fall spawn, you definitely want to bring a machete, because everything's still grown up from the summer. You're coming out here in October, you're going to want to have to find a way to clear a path. Make sure that you bring something to keep your fish in. I do not suggest a cooler, because you're going to be doing some walking, okay? And you want to make sure that you have something. Stringers are okay, but we prefer the mesh fishing baskets. That's the best thing that we found. And as always, we highly suggest you bring someone with you, because more than likely in this area, you're not going to have cell phone service. And just in case something goes wrong, you want to have somebody with you. Keep it safe. All right, now let's talk about tackle. Tackle is an interesting one, and probably a very important one if you want to be able to catch the white bass during the spawn. Now, we have had some success over the past couple years with obviously inline spinners, some motts, some rooster tails, and so forth like that. We've had some good luck with them. We really started producing on the smaller swim baits like Storm and Berkeley, these really tiny swim baits that do really well. You can pop them or just swim them in depending on how the fish are reacting. But what's really got us going last year on having a successful white bass fishing is the standardized Freaky Frank worms. Now, we picked up these last year, and they are phenomenal crappie and trout baits, but these baits are also phenomenal for pretty much any species in any type of water, and white bass are highly included in that. In fact, the Freaky Frank is what we're going to be using 99.9% of the time during the white bass spawns this year. We're going to be using it in different methods now, of course. Now, it is, you know, this is a full rigged up fishing system. They come in with the 32 second ounce jig heads, you've got the actual worms, and you've got a slip bobber system that works really well, especially when you're fishing in the rapids. You can just toss that thing out there, let it float and drift, and they'll nail it. Or if the water's a little bit calmer, you can actually do the bobbing system like we do with the crappie. But you can also put these baits on, these worms pretty much on anything. You can hook them up to Popeyes and jig them across the river. You can hook them to little underspin jig heads that have some blades on them. any method works really well, but the tail action on these things is absolutely phenomenal, and that is our #1 recommendation for fall white bass and spring white bass. All right, let's talk about the conditions. Now, we've already talked about what kind of weather, the timing as far as weather conditions go, of when you need to start looking and being prepared to get ready for the white bass spawn. But let's talk about the physical conditions. You'll hear a lot about murky, muddy water. Now, we've had success in murky, muddy water. You can look at our past episodes and videos. We've limited out in the nasty weather. But to be quite honest with you, we have had the best luck in crystal clear water. When it's not running too fast, when it's running just about good speed, haven't had too much rain, but had just enough to keep the water levels up, that is when the moment sets perfect. Now, not only that, we seem to have the best luck between 8 o'clock in the morning and 11 o'clock in the morning, and then again, of course, the sun sets a little bit later, then again, about 2 to 3 hours before sunset. So that lunch break, they just kind of seem to slow down and stop. Now, the other condition that you might want to look at, especially in a river system that feeds a lake that's dammed up for a reservoir like Taylorsville, is how fast they're pulling water. I can tell you right now, you want to pay attention to the water flow, because you can be catching white bass after white bass after white bass after white bass. But the moment there is a drastic change in current, a very quick drastic change in current, it can click it off like that. So if they decide to let out that dam super fast and super hard, it can kill your entire fishing experience, and you're going to have to reevaluate. Now, one of the things I mentioned earlier about why we like bank fishing so much instead of using the kayak in this system so that you can move up and down the bank, you can be catching, and then it'll stop. Don't let that make you stay in one place. You're going to have to move up and down the bank system between the rapids and pools to find your white bass, where they are at. And they can move mid-fish and recollect somewhere else, and I can prove it time and time again. So if the bite slows down and the bite stops, move up away from the lake. If you don't have any luck, maybe they're moving back towards the lake, go back to your other position, try another couple casts. If that's not really producing anymore, move closer towards the lake, and I guarantee you're going to find you a little pool or set of rapids where they've reset up and you'll start catching them. Be open-minded. Cast in different locations. Don't cast in the same spot every time. Open up your cast. Cast across, cast at an angle, cast over at this angle, cast parallel to the bank. You got to switch things up because these fish are moving, they're feeding, and they're spawning. That's the best advice I can give you for the white bass run. That's how we fish the white bass run. That's how we have successful white bass runs on Salt River in Kentucky. And I'm sure you can apply this information and these methods and this gear and these baits to other areas and regions of the United States to have successful white bass fishing. So, from Outdoors in the Bluegrass, we wish you all the best white bass spawning frenzy run fishing action that you can possibly have. Get your wife, get your kids, get your brothers, get your parents, get your grandparents, get your friends out with you and enjoy this awesome experience. And pay attention to us, because we're going to continue to provide you all kinds of updates throughout the season to let you know how the spawning's going, how the conditions are, and when the bite's on. And we'll bring it to you, baby, on Outdoors in the Bluegrass.